Yeah, if we want to revisit this after my wife works for the State Department, I will be very, very happy to speak a little more freely. People were kind of like, what's happening? There's this guy that's Iranian from rural Kentucky who looks like us but has this really thick Southern accent, and is like looks like us. And like when we go dancing, is dancing like us. And then we have our like celebrations, he knows what he's doing, but then he can't speak the language with us because he didn't learn what's happening right now. My dad's vision and view on eating pork as Muslim, his name is Muhammad, so it's like you can't like ignore that connection. Um, and his view on it is God is forgiving and pork is delicious. So there you go. He was like, I think God has bigger fish to fry than to worry about if I'm eating pork or not. So I'm gonna just eat pork.
Okay, great.
In that regard, what my vision was as a kid to what I am now, I'm kind of in a roundabout way living that. And it wasn't like an intentional thing. It just, this is kind of what has happened over my life. I made a series of decisions and ended up in this spot.
Yeah, David, thank you for joining me on Embracing the Journey. It's a pleasure to have you with me. The first question I really want to start with, and I've started with this thought a lot recently, is the differences between then and now from when you were kind of growing up. I believe Kentucky, right, is where you were
That's
born and
correct.
raised or grew up. What are the main differences between then and now, and what you expected your life would look like versus the reality of today is where I want to start the conversation this
Okay.
morning. See where that takes us.
Yeah, I mean, I think as a kid, I always wanted to travel. I always wanted to kind of get outside of where I grew up. And just for the listener's sake, I grew up on a farm in rural Kentucky, about 20 minutes outside of Bardstown, Kentucky, which is famous if you're a bourbon drinker, or if you listen to crime podcasts. Um, so there were a few years in a row where there were some unsolved murders that some are starting to get solved. But anyway, I grew up on this farm. We didn't work it. After my parents divorced, they sold the cattle, and then my dad moved into town. Um, but I always was looking for something outside that experience. Not that there's anything wrong with growing up on a farm, but I just was constantly pulled. I was felt like I was being pulled away from that place. Um, and that was predominantly, I would suspect, due to the fact that my dad is an immigrant from Iran, and I was always interested in what my connection to that place was. And I think because of that, and because there were no other cultural like touch points um, for the Iranian culture in where I grew up, except for my dad, I was always looking for something international, something that was different than where I grew up and what the norm was there. Um, so in that regard, what my vision was as a kid to what I am now, I'm kind of in a roundabout way living that. And it wasn't like an intentional thing. It just, this is kind of what has happened over my life. I made a series of decisions and ended up in this spot. Um, but it's doing something different. Whereas I thought I would be the reason for moving to these spaces. My wife has a job that is allowing us to travel, so I'm the one who's the trailing spouse, and so I get to kind of scratch the creative itch, if you will, and focus on writing and doing a little bit of photography work. So yeah, and I think the differences though, like, are significant. One, I'm in Warsaw, and Warsaw is quite different than Bardstown, Kentucky. I also lived in Washington D.C. for 12 years, and then we were just in Beijing for 2 years prior to this, and all of those spaces, you know, uh, are, I don't want to say vastly different because there were some there's some similarities between all of those spaces. I think um, there's some insularity in all of the places. Some what's the term, like feelings of, I don't want to call xenophobia is probably the wrong term, but there were elements of that in terms of people very skeptical of outsiders. I would say DC was probably the most welcoming place that I've been to and lived. It was probably the most diverse place that I've lived. Um, and that's probably the place where I was able to feel most comfortable within myself as an Iranian American. There's a large Iranian American community there, so it um, has
In
kind of
DC.
in
In DC.
DC. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. There's two, we'll say three main focal points of Iranian immigration into the United States, and it's the DC area, and then Los Angeles and in like the Silicon Valley, San Francisco area. Um, and each of those various pods have like cultural distinctions, and there's like it's you know interesting ways in which people approach their Iranianness, and it's kind of distinct in each place, or the way that they approach life in general. Um, and um, Yeah, and having grown up in Kentucky without any of those cultural touch points, going into the DC area and engaging with my Iranianness really for the first time was a really fascinating experience. In that, um, I think in both directions, people were kind of like, what's happening?" There's this guy that's Iranian from rural Kentucky who looks like us but has this really thick Southern accent, and is like looks like us, and like when we go dancing, is dancing like us, and then when we have our like celebrations, knows what he's doing, but then he can't speak the language with us because he didn't learn it, what's happening right now. Uh, so yeah, it was a
I like how you call it your Iranianness. I'm trying to think if I've ever used the term Englishness. I don't think I've ever
yeah.
got into
I,
that stuff.
I've not. I don't know how to. I've not found another word for that. So um,
What does that mean in general? Is that just about trying to fit into a culture, or is that trying to bring out your cultural roots to educate other people? Where does that term kind of originate from, and what does it mean to you?
in terms of the genesis of it overall, I don't know. But for me, it's about me personally trying to find ways to fit that heritage into my life. So, and it's really just doing the things that I know how to do, and then trying to find ways to expand it gradually. Like I don't speak the language. I'm not very good. I mean, I shouldn't say I'm not good linguistically. I can pick up languages if I study it, but like not just um, on the fly or whatever. And we never. I don't want to say we never learned it. We picked up some words, but of course, growing up in rural Kentucky, as you can imagine, there aren't a whole lot of Iranians around, and so we didn't have it around us, so there was no real need. Plus, I was born right after the revolution and the hostage crisis, and so again, as you can imagine, in rural Kentucky, if a deeply brown man, my dad is 100% like you cannot. If you see him, you're like, this dude's not a white dude from middle America, right? With his kids who kind of look like him speaking Persian in the 80s in Walmart or Kroger, right? That's going to throw a lot of people off. And so my dad was always kind of skeptical of teaching us that in that way.
Okay.
And so for me, my Iranianness is trying to find ways to embrace the culture, and then also trying to find ways to fit that into my life. Um, One of the ways I did that was through following the national team, Iranian national team, Team Melli, um, and because it was a thing that I knew, like I understood the game, I played the game, I went played in college, I've coached a little bit, not as much as you have, but like enough, and I followed the game pretty closely. Um, And so I could watch this team with something that I knew and then use that as a springboard to like engaging a little bit more. The second thing was through understanding the relationship between Iran and the United States, at least through um, 2020, when I kind of disassociated with well, sorry, through 2022, but um, in using kind of my understanding of that relationship as a way, a springboard to get involved with the community. So either through community organizing or political campaigns like door knocking campaigns or getting Iranians involved in local politics. Um, so using those things. Um, what else? Yeah, it's it's really just using the things I knew to get my foot in the door to then learn more about the culture, whether it's what happens on Nowruz in ways beyond how my dad celebrated it, which was, um, there's a thing that gets presented each Nowruz about a week and a half before 2 weeks before. It's called the half scene, and it's like the Christmas tree is for Christmas, except there are these 7 items. Each of those items start with the letter S, and they each have meanings, right? Um, my dad would only do one of those things each Nowruz, and so I only thought it was just him. I thought it was growing grass. That was all that you did for Nowruz. I didn't know that there were 6 other things you're supposed to put on the table.
Yeah.
Um, so there was that, and then there's this thing that comes 13 days after the New Year, Persian New Year, called Sizdah Bedar, which is this big picnic because the 13th day is the bad luck day, so everyone goes outside and has a big picnic. Um, of course, in the U.S., that gets changed to like the nearest weekend, right? So if it's Wednesday, then people will go out the weekend before, and they'll also go out the weekend after. Um, and so um, learning about that and learning how people celebrate that event, and then also just finding out about like Persian poetry, you know, uh, Persian cinema, right? Iranian cinema is like phenomenal. If people have an opportunity to go and watch movies made by Iranian directors, I would suggest doing that. Ahmed Kiarostami, Jafar Panahi, um, Asghar, what's his last name? Farhadi. And sometimes they win the Oscar for best foreign film, or they're in the running for that. So getting an opportunity to embrace the culture through film, through poetry, through art, through meeting other writers who are writing about growing up, immigrating to the U.S. and their like issues that they face and the struggles that they go through, and then comparing them to mine or leaning on some of the themes that they've experienced, and then realizing like, oh, I went through something similar but in a different way. Um, yeah, so that, I mean, I think as a kid growing up, that was the ideal thing for me too, right? I wanted to be a part of that. I wanted to have those things primarily because it's was who I was, right? And where I grew up, there's this there was this everybody wanted to know where you were from, not in a like malicious way, but in a way of like, what's your background? Who are your folks? Where do they come from? Where are your cousins? And in the town where I grew up, everybody's aunts and uncles and cousins were all there, right? Like there were only a handful of us who weren't from that space, and our relatives were elsewhere, right? And then also because my mom's family were so close, right? They were she was one of 8. Each of her siblings had kids, so we were all interacting at holidays and through the summer and whatnot. So um,
Was your mom American?
yeah, my mom was American. Her family may have mentioned this in our previous conversation. Her family their DNA first touched the colonies in like the 1680s or before. So like they've been in the U.S. space for a long time, which is another kind of like wild thing to think about. Like we have these new roots and we have these old roots, and they're constantly kind of like not competing with each other, but that kind of frames the American experience. And I guess
Right.
that sort of segues into my like whole reason to write and like communicate is to talk about the expansion of the idea of the American experience and what it means, and that it's not this uniform thing, right? Like
Yeah.
there's not one way to be an American. So, right.
Yeah. So you when did you were born? Were you born in Kentucky?
Yeah.
You were born in America.
1982. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. And then, when did your dad make it to the US? Why did your dad come over?
My dad arrived in the U.S. in 1964.
Okay.
He was coming for two reasons: one, to learn English, and two, because his cousin she needed open heart surgery, and they got her in with a physician in the U.S., either D.C. or New York. I don't remember the story 100%. And my dad had failed his college entrance exams and failed the English portion of the test. So that was, I think he took it two or three times, couldn't pass that part. He missed it by 2 or 3 points. His uncle was like, "Hey, go with your cousin to the U.S., take an English course, whatever, come back, and then you take your entrance exam a year from now." My dad jokes that he never learned English, and that's the reason why he's been in the U.S. for 60 plus years. Um, what, whatever. But yeah, it's he he came. He lived in D.C. for about 6 months. He met a friend who went to school in Kentucky, and the guy said, "You don't have to speak English at these two schools, so just apply, or you don't. They don't test your English. You can just apply, and they say yes or no." And he's like, "Well, I don't have anything to lose," so he went to this. He went to Murray State University in Western Kentucky, and he ended up staying. And of course, his plan at that time was to just move further west. He enjoyed mountain climbing. That was the thing. One of the things he did in Iran, and Colorado and Alaska and California had some of the best mountain climbing in the world. So he said, "If I'm here, I might as well just keep moving." And then he really enjoyed Murray. It was also inexpensive compared to the other places, I think, even at that time. And so he stuck around, and then he started teaching after college. Met my mom. They moved to my hometown, and there we go. So he went back. He went back once in 1973, and then we never went as kids. Through the 80s was the Iran-Iraq War, and then also the relationship between Iran and the United States wasn't great. So it's like it's not just hard getting into Iran; it's also hard coming back into the U.S.
Right.
From Iran. I've had several friends who get detained and questioned for several hours after being in Iran visiting family. And so, through the 90s, it was us in the summer playing sports. And then after that, as you can imagine, it's 9/11. And so tensions were still high, even though Iran wasn't involved in that. And then since 20, since the negotiations over the nuclear issue started going in full, going to Iran was really hard for people who were dual nationals, because the Iranians have been detaining people and keeping them there for extended periods of time to use as leverage in negotiations, or competing elements within the the regime were using them to pummel the people who were negotiating and make them look bad. So, um, and now because my wife is working for the U.S. government, it's not something that we can do. So it's just not going to happen.
Yeah, it kind of puts a spanner in the works for that one a
Yeah,
little.
yeah, exactly.
Don't forget to like and subscribe to help us bring these stories to more individuals.
I'm always curious about how people's identity kind of develops and
Yeah.
shifts. And you're talking a lot there about um, obviously growing up in an area where the Iranian culture wasn't
Mhm.
really present, right?
Yeah.
And I guess from the outside looking in, it could be quite easy for you to go into your shell in
Mhm.
an environment where you are obviously different in
Mhm.
all different shapes and ways. But it seems like just curiosity was what shaped your kind of childhood, right? In terms of what the Iranian culture was, or the heritage, or the roots you talked about there of your
Yeah.
family starting coming over in the 1600s. So was curiosity just naturally there from a young age? Was that cultivated by your dad? Was that just cultivated by the environment about learning why maybe you felt different, but or
Mhm.
was made aware you were different and didn't know why? Can you
Yeah.
talk to me a little bit about where that curiosity factor comes from?
Yeah, I think the curiosity factor has to have been slightly just genetic. Like you know how like even if parents tell kids they can't do something or they don't directly say don't do something, kids are still curious about that thing. They still are drawn to that thing.
Mhm.
Um, I think a handful of things happen. One, my dad wasn't. Neither one of my parents were people to kind of shy away and stay hidden, right? So like they didn't just say, okay, my kids are a little different, so um, or I'm a little different, so I'm just not going to be visible. I'm just going to
Right.
kind of float through society. It helped. My dad was a teacher, and it was a small town, so literally everyone knew who my dad was. He also taught tennis on the side. It was a swimming coach as well. So and was like everywhere all the time.
Okay.
Um, and so it kind of like made it easier for us to be around and visible. And then also my mom, what she did for her job as a social worker, she was in the court system, so like she knew other sets of people. Um, anyway, so there was that, right? The fact that my parents weren't trying to like hide us away and protect us; they were just like, "You're gonna be kids like everyone else." And then there was the very clear realization that my dad wasn't like everyone else, right? So like you can imagine in a southern town in rural Kentucky, there were it's about 95% white, and there are about the other 5% is or 4.9% is black, and then that 0.1% was us, right? So like as a kid at 4 or 5 years old, it was like I knew it was like okay, we're not these folks over here because my dad is not these folks over here.
Right.
Are we black or are we something else? Right? Like literally that's like the mindset of a kid. And I used to think that it was like weird to think that way. And then I talked to my brother about this and he was like, "Oh yeah, my kids did the same thing about our dad. They used to think that our dad was black too because they didn't have a frame of reference outside of our town because my brother is still in our hometown. Um, and I do remember vividly asking my dad if we were black because, like, as a 4 or 5 year old, I was just curious. I'm like, okay, well, he's not white, so he's got to be black. And just him trying to come up with to a 4 or 5 year old or 6 year old asking that question and trying to figure out a way to like, how do I tell them no without sounding bad, but
Yeah.
also how do I explain the world outside of this small place that he doesn't know or have a frame of reference outside of.
Right.
Um,
But there was an awareness within you to know that there was
Yeah,
a difference there, right? So
yeah,
that, yeah,
yeah.
I
And then on my mom's side, like there was always this. At some point, we started doing genealogy. I was probably third, fourth, fifth grade, and so that idea of like origin, where we came from, where our background is, how we're connected to the space that we grew up in and that we visit, um, became important too. So it was like, okay, well, if this is important on this side, then it's got to be important on this side too. And so I need to find this as well, and figure out how to approach it and absorb it into my life.
So you talked a little bit about looking for something on the outside earlier. From I guess that came from just that curiosity and
Mhm.
awareness that something was
Yeah.
different, and although there was something different within your home community,
Mhm.
there was probably a big curiosity about what was further afield than Kentucky, right?
Yeah.
Um, so how did that shape kind of your school direction? I'm assuming you went and looked the college route, right? I think we spoke offline
Yeah.
prior to this about potentially the Navy. Was it the Navy or
Mhm.
military route that you potentially looked at? Can you talk to me a little bit about that journey you took from looking for something on the outside and how that translated into your school and your
Mhm.
days going into college potentially or the professional world?
Yeah, I think several things. One, when I was looking at universities after high school, I guess several things I looked for. One, it's like, could I play soccer there? Two, do they have study abroad programs? And three, do they have some sort of like international relations or international element to the school? Um, and so that was one way I did that. Another way is like I befriended every exchange student that came into our school, and that was just because I was like, I'm looking for something different
Okay.
and figuring out where, like, trying to like pick up on how things are different in those spaces too. Um, and I'm sure they were like, "Why is this dude like trying to be friends with me, or like overly aggressive?" Um, and then I did the same in college too. I befriended a lot of the Middle Eastern students because of that. It was like, not a lot of Iranian students when I was in school in the U.S. At that point. Post revolution, post 9/11, it just was really hard to get visas for Iranians into the U.S. Um, and um, and so that was one element of it too. The Navy came about. Um, I was finished with undergrad. I was going into the career services office because I didn't really know what I wanted to do, which is a theme throughout my life, I think, like a subplot, I guess. Um, and the guy who ran the office, he was kind of a mentor when I first started in school because he was a referee for high school soccer, and I did a year, a season of that, and for high school soccer. He's like, "Oh, you're Iranian. I know what you should do." He's like, "Let me call the Navy guys up," and I was like, "Oh, okay, cool." And then about a week or two later, he sends me an email. He was like, "Hey, they're going to be in town. Be here at noon tomorrow or something." I was like, oh, "Okay, cool." Well,
What was
he had
what was the reason he thought that you're an Iranian guy, you could join the Navy? What was that all about?
so because the Navy in the military services are always looking for people who can speak certain critical
Oh, okay.
languages,
I got you.
and he either had made the assumption that I could speak Persian, or or that whatever I could speak was good enough.
That's not the
Because
first thing that's not the first thing that comes to my mind while you were choosing
yeah,
specifically took.
so it happened again in another way with another organization, um, with another professor, but later on, anyway, and he, the guys met me and I kind of told them what was going on and they were like, "Oh, so you don't speak Persian?" I was like, I can do the basics. I don't know how to read it. I can, I guess I could figure it out if you all like sent me to school or something. Well, I don't know. They're like, oh, well, we thought you could speak the language. I was like, I've never said that to anyone ever. So that was that guy overblowing it. But what ends up happening is I take the test. I score really high on the test. I was not mature enough. I was not ready for it. So I just said, hey, I'm going to put it on pause. Um, I go to grad school. I studied diplomacy and international commerce. Um, and again, we're leaving grad school in 2009, 2010, literally the worst job market. Um, and I think most of my friends, none of them, very few of them from that class ended up doing anything international related. Um, and so we kind of had to just find something. And one of my professors was a former officer in the Navy, and he knew that I had had an interest in this in the past. And he was like, if you don't know what you want to do, follow that up. Uh, and so I get in, and they find they go through my medical records, and they find a few things from when I was younger that were no longer applicable, that for them were red flags. So um, I got medically disqualified, um, and so I had to hit reset, and it took me about 9 months to get everything together, and I moved to DC. Um, and it was one of those things of like, this is one last shot in the dark to see if it's going to happen or not. If I'm going to be able to get out of this place that I grew up in, that I love and I care about deeply, but just wasn't going to work for me, for someone who wanted to do something global related. And so my friend, a guy who grew up in my hometown, was living there. He was like, "Hey, come see if you like it. Spend a few days. Spend 10 days here. Crash on my couch, and then when you're go back home, get everything together, and then move back." Which is what I did, and it easily the best decision of my life, even though it was hard. And I worked in restaurants and I worked long hours, sometimes 2 or 3 jobs in a week, um, or at a time, 2 different restaurants and then a day job, just trying to like make ends meet and figure it out and stay afloat there. Um, those were also some of the best times of my life, I think. Like, just as a person, I grew the most because I didn't have anyone to fall back on. It was just on me the whole time. So it was just like, okay, I've got to, whatever decision I make, how's that going to move me forward and keep me here in this place?
So
So,
for that 9 months, was there any real plan, or was it just a case of get out of Kentucky and into?
yeah.
I mean, in DC was because of the Iranian culture in DC, or was there something different there? It was just to do with your friend being there.
One of my friends was there. I knew someone there. I knew a few people there. I had a friend who was working at a restaurant who was like, when you get here, come the next Monday. It's slow. Speak to the manager. You'll have a job waiting for you, right? That sort of thing. Just that way, I had something, I could earn some income while I'm looking for something else.
Okay. Did you
Um,
know what you were looking for at that point, or that
no.
was a complete unknown? Okay.
I mean, it kind of, I was maybe work at a think tank and like write some reports or something, or like go on the Hill and work in a congressional office, or figure out a way to work for the State Department. But it was, yeah, I ended up not doing any of that. I did an internship at a thing at a nonprofit community organization that advocated for issues important to the Iranian-American community, and that was really fun because I ended up working for them on a volunteer uh, uh, level, organizing, um, you know, hosting events and stuff, and like being trying to like build out, get more volunteers basically. And that part was really fun, and I enjoyed that. But very quickly, you can get jaded about working in the policy world in DC, because it just the machinery moves very slowly, and there are a lot of factors that are difficult to like overcome. I'm trying to be as nice as possible. I'm sorry, but it,
I'm tired of listening to the politicians because
yeah,
it
if
drives
if
me insane just listening to it.
yeah, if we want to revisit this after my wife works for the State Department, I will be very, very happy to speak a little more freely. But yeah, and then also just I'll be honest, I love my community to death. The Iranian community has been great to me, um, but also there are internal issues within the community that just don't ever seem to go away, and it makes it hard to have progress. And yeah, so like I was there, I was doing some work with that. I worked in property management with a local company, managing different properties across the city. I was a bartender, server, managed restaurants. I worked for a trade association that represented software companies that they investigated illegal distribution of software, and that was actually pretty fun too because I got to use my investigative and research skills to like track people who were online selling goods that they shouldn't be selling, and that was pretty fun. And then we got to meet some people in law enforcement that um, helped train us on certain investigative tactics. So that was great, but none of it was really like international focused. Um, where I got that from, where I got that like itch scratched, if you will, to not use that phrase over and over, but where I was able to get that need met was through just like social interactions and exchanges and just being in an environment that felt alive culturally and socially and felt vibrant and constantly changing. Um, like my friend who I grew up with, he's my best friend, and he is now living in DC. He talks about he was like, you know what I like about DC and what I like about visiting you, because he was still living in our hometown at the time. He's like, I can walk outside of your apartment and walk for half a block or walk for 10 minutes and not know a single person that I interact with or that I walk across. But if I go do the same thing in Bardstown, Kentucky, I can't even walk half a block and I'm passing three people that I know. And they know who I am, they know my parents, right? And I'll see them again at some point in that day, right? So he was like, it just, you go out and you can be anonymous. You can go into a bar or restaurant and not know every person in that room.
Right.
And so
Some people like that, right?
some people like that, and that is great. They want if that's the life they want, that's awesome, fantastic. I'm not telling them they can't live that life. I'm just saying that's not the life I want to live.
Catch up on all the latest episodes of Embracing the Journey at www.raisemindset.org on Spotify, Apple, and Podbean.
You said something just about I think it was to do with the Iranian culture not continuing to have some issues. Was that internal or was that external?
Mm,
Was that something internal that was kind of holding that group or
um, yeah. So there's I would say it's an internal thing, right?
okay,
We have a hard time working together as a community, even if
internally, right?
internally, yeah.
Okay.
There's always a lot of infighting, always a lot of people stabbing each other in the back. All that happens literally in every organization, right?
Yeah.
Um, if two organizations are working on a project, say it's like anti-sanctions or pro-diplomacy, then at some point one of those two organizations, even if they agree on that issue, will find ways to like break up or find ways to undermine the other one. Or, for example, this summer, whenever the Israelis and the U.S. government were bombing Iran, um, there were several protests, um, anti-war protests breaking out in D.C. Right, um, and one organization was hosting an event, an anti-war event at a coffee shop. There was another anti-war group protesting that group's anti-war coffee shop event. And it's like, well, you're both anti-war. Why are you not working together? Why are there two Iranian groups standing for the same thing, arguing with each other over the same thing that they agree on, right?
Yeah.
Um, so there's a
The
lot of
reason,
that, and that was a microcosm, I guess. But there's a whole lot of that within the community that makes it really hard to get anything done. It makes it unfortunate and frustrating.
yeah, the reason I asked that question is it so obviously just listening to your childhood, there's obvious themes of curiosity and awareness that are there, but
Yeah,
there's also a understanding of the need to be adaptable, I guess,
yep,
that for that 9 months that you're trying to make a change, you're trying to make a change of location
yeah,
from Kentucky to DC,
yeah,
you have to be adaptable in those situations. So I was just wondering where that level of adaptability comes from. Is that something that you learn from a young age just through being curious? Is that something that you learn that things aren't always going to go, you know, my way through school
mhm,
and the Navy and
yeah,
discredit you and people making assumptions, I guess, of you being able to speak Persian to join the Navy,
yeah,
um, and then being able to pivot off that and
mhm.
then go a different direction. Is adaptability something that you have always had from those younger age through those cultural roots, or what your mom and dad brought you up to be? It feels like it's all tied together.
Yeah.
I'm trying to learn how the brain develops in that way, because not everybody. And the reason I asked about the internal fighting is, and the same thing I see on the news every night in Washington, is that people just can't seem to be adaptable anymore. It's
Yeah,
like, this is my idea. You don't agree with me. I'm going to continue to hammer in on this
yeah,
message rather than be somewhat flexible within. And I was
yeah,
just an off thought in my head where that adaptability come from.
yeah. I think um, I have a thought on the politics thing, and I'll briefly touch on that. But first,
We'll stay away from the politics just for your wife's
um,
security.
well, it's a bipartisan thing. So,
Okay.
but no, the I think on the politics things, I guess I'll touch on that because it's more pressing. I guess is that the reward system that we set up for politicians allows that mentality to be pervasive. Um, so we as voters could do a better job making choices and being active in our um, in the way we vote and engage in the things that we ask of our politicians. So that's thing one. And then in terms of for me, what happened, I think it's a little bit of both. I think the fact that my dad came to the U.S. with $150 in his pocket with very little English, and then was like, "I'll go to rural Kentucky for college," and figured it out. There's got to be a little bit of that, like just genetically adaptable coming through. Also, on my mom's side, my you know she grew up Jehovah's Witness, which in the Bible Belt isn't an easy thing to be either. Um, and her parents grew up during the Depression, and were children. My granddad was a child of sharecroppers. My grandmother, her parents, her dad was like a kind of an itinerant laborer and moved to Detroit for a period of time, and then moved back to Western Kentucky, West Tennessee area. Um, and so just that sort of, you figure it out and try to constantly make positive steps forward and be flexible and fluid through that process.
So where did the kind of writing and photography path come from? Was that just something that naturally happened through the journey that you was on, or was that a conscious choice that you made?
So writing has always been, I shouldn't say always, my eighth grade year, my writing teacher, um, she was the first person to really, and really the only one to really teach me how to write, like how to structure a sentence, how to structure a paragraph, an essay. Really, first person to teach us about grammar. Um, and she kind of was the first person to plant the seed of like writing and being and enjoy writing, and have that like joy to write stuff. Um, and then I never really like exercised that again until college, maybe. Um, and I took a journalism course. I was started out as a journalism major and then went to political science because I liked that more. Um, and I still like that was still just like a thing that I enjoyed doing, but was like, okay, I need an actual like knowledge base. And then through grad school and then moving to DC, it was something that I wanted to explore, and it's just something you do on the side. Um, and then after you know managing restaurants and working in restaurants a long time, and when after my wife and I got married and realizing that like we were ships in the night, like she was working during the day and I was working in the evenings, and we never saw each other. I just was like, can I try this writing thing out and see if it works so that we can actually like see each other? And it, you know, that's what I've been doing ever since.
Okay.
Um, you know,
And when
fortunate.
you say try this writing thing out, did you have something lined up to go into, or was it kind
Um,
of a
no,
internal project?
yeah. So it was a few things. It was wanting to write a novel. There was a novel in me that I knew I wanted to do, and get out there. And then also just writing about the things that were going on, like social and political commentary, writing about like the issues that are being discussed in DC, and just contributing that way to the conversation. Um, and there was an opportunity for an internship at the Center for American Progress, a left-leaning think tank, which will tell you how I kind of sit in politics. But um, the they needed someone who was just out of college or still in college instead of someone who'd been out for like a decade. So it didn't really work out. Um, but yeah, the writing thing just was something I enjoyed doing, and I finally had the opportunity to focus on it or do more of it. And I've gotten some pretty decent opportunities out of it. Like I've had stuff in the Liverpool Echo for writing about being a Liverpool fan abroad. I have been published in the Huffington Post, several of the local papers in Kentucky. Um, there was a think tank in DC that would publish some of my work as well on U.S. Iran relations, um, and helping people like do some ghostwriting projects as well. So
Yeah, I could have used you the last 6 months as I'm writing the book that I've just finished the first draft.
yeah,
I realized so much later on that I'm like, this would have saved me so much time if I knew this 3 months earlier, and then
yeah,
just let it go. But,
yeah,
yeah. Did you manage to write the novel that was in you from earlier? Did you get that far yet, or
yeah. I have. We'll say I've finished a draft, and
how
uh,
long's that been in the making? Like
that
20 years?
um, I started one in fall of 2017, and it was like mixing and matching, and then I got distracted, because that's what happens when you're a creative. You get distracted, you put a project to the side, and then when I found out we were moving to China, I said, okay, my goal for China is to finish the novel, like 100%, like finish the novel. And then I started taking my writing class again, and the instructor was like, "This needs a backstory," and so I had to redo all of it, or just start over and do the backstory for the original novel I was working on.
So we've touched on it briefly, but obviously you travel a lot now through your wife's role. Can you just explain a little bit what your wife does as Department of State? What does she do that's kind of taking you around the world?
Yeah, so she is a psychiatrist, and that is what she does. That is not a covered job, by the way. Um, so each
Put that
embassy
out.
and consulate has a medical unit, and in that medical unit, they provide the medical care for all of the direct hires and their families. Right. So
Okay.
anyone working out of that consulate that is a direct hire, so it could be DOJ, Department of Commerce, could be DOD, Department of State, anyone working in there and their families gets treated as kind of in like a primary care setting by doctors or nurses hired by the State Department. My wife is a psychiatrist, and so she does that. She does the mental health care for U.S. direct hires at embassies and consulates. We are based in Warsaw, but she covers a region that is quite large. For example, when we were in Beijing, she covered the region that included China, Hong Kong, South Korea, and Mongolia. In this region, it's the Baltic states, Finland, Russia, Kyrgyzstan, and Kazakhstan, and was supposed to be Ukraine and Belarus, but someone asked for Ukraine, so she doesn't have to go, which is great. So, for obvious reasons, and yeah, and so that's what she does, and so she gets to travel a lot more than I do, obviously, and but through that process, when we were in Beijing, we visited Japan, Tokyo. I went again by myself to Tokyo and then Sapporo. Um, and we went to Seoul. I tried to go watch FC Seoul with Jesse Lingard, but he was injured that day, so like I didn't get to watch him play. I was hoping maybe he would like reinvigorate his career just as like a football fan. Like, okay, this
He
guy
doesn't want to play. He doesn't
doesn't
want to
want to
play.
play. Yeah.
No.
Um, and what else? I went to Vietnam, which was really fun, and that is like a it's an experience. It's just a completely different. It's like China is like orderly, and everyone thinks China isn't orderly, but it is, but it isn't. Like there's some rules and some guidelines, whereas like Vietnam just felt like it's a free for all, and I kind of appreciated that because everyone accepted that it was a free for all. Whereas like in China, there are people who want rules, and then there are people who don't want rules, and it's too balanced between those two for it to work, right?
Right.
So it feels like pretty chaotic, whereas it feels like you can't predict. It's unpredictable, right? Whereas in Vietnam, because no one follows the rules, you kind of like no one's gonna try, no one's gonna stop here, right? Or like I just have to figure it out, which makes everything easier. Anyway, um, yeah, and so we got to travel a bit through there. We were in Hong Kong for a bit. We went back to the States for 3 weeks in California. And then here we've been here for 3 or 4 months, and um, we've gone down to Krakow, as we say in the U.S. I was down in Lublin for the Crystal Palace Dynamo Kiev match. I'm like touring places because of football matches. As you can tell, like I'm going to be in Munich for the Bayern Munich Club Brugge match next week. So like it's my wife just looks at me. She's like, "You're really only going for soccer?" I'm like, "Yeah, kind of." So you don't get this in the U.S. Like you have sports tourism, but you don't have it in a way. I think the stadium experience in the US is almost too uniform wherever you go. There's maybe one or two places that are standout experiences, but everything else is the same, right? Whereas like in Europe, if you go to a football match, every stadium is kind of unique. Every place has its own flavor and flair, and this thing that you can kind of feel that's different, that gives you a unique experience, for lack of a better term.
Catch up on all the latest episodes of Embracing the Journey at www.basemindset.org on Spotify, Apple, and Podbean.
What have you learned most, do you think, about your experiences, like traveling, having lived in those cultures?
Mm-hmm.
What kind of tests in terms of the lifestyle and how it's reshaped you have you experienced through these travels?
Yeah, I think to answer the first question, Beijing, and I would say Warsaw too, neither of these places were on my radar as places that I was like, oh, you could live here, right, and have a pretty good time, right? Um, Beijing was like literally, I had a list, absolutely not, like we're not going to these places, and Beijing was on that list with Moscow. um, and it was basically just, it's because of like the hyper securitized environment that you have to live in if you go to those places. And I don't think people like understand fully that, like, even like if you're an expat, you get a broader bandwidth. And because we were diplomats, we got broader bandwidth, but you're still being monitored everywhere you go. You're still like, your phone is tapped, your house presumably is tapped or bugged. Um, you probably have someone who knows where you are at any given time from the internal workings of the Chinese government, or the Russian government for that matter, if because I mentioned Moscow. Um, and so and then also just like it seemed like you don't have the same access to things um, there that you needed to survive in the U.S. Right? So like you know, water wasn't clean, air wasn't clean, access to good medicine, that sort of thing. We had young kids, so it was like, can we trust the products we're giving our kids that are made there? Um, and what you learn pretty quickly, at least with regard to China, is they've made some advancements in all of those departments that makes all of those things, all of those like anxieties, like go away. Not go away, but like they're not as bad. They're not as acute as they were when we were planning to go. Um, and then in terms of the like surveillance, you just kind of learn to live with it, and you're just you kind of have workarounds. Again, it's the adaptability thing. You just kind of figure it out. You're like, okay, how do I talk to my wife about this thing that I don't want these guys to know about? And you either figure out code words or you just talk about it, and you're like, I don't care if they know at some point. Like, it's not important. It's not a state secret. So, right, I'm not ashamed of it, but like whatever. So,
Is that,
um,
is that the route that you took? You just decided to talk about it, or did you?
yeah. Eventually, we just were like in the house. We were like, um, I guess I can talk about it on this. I'll talk about it, then I'll tell you if I want it in or not. Because um,
Don't feel comfortable about it, then you don't have to.
yeah, just yeah. I won't mention it. Then, but like there were some things that happened that were kind of sketchy, and I didn't really know like how to discuss it. Like I discussed it with my wife, but if I had to like message her immediately because it happened again, um, like how do I do that? You know, in a way that's like lets her know, but
Right.
those guys don't know, right?
Was
So
that Is that just the hardest thing then in terms of the travel was just the restrictions or the feeling that you weren't, I guess, free, I guess is
Yeah,
the word.
so
Yeah.
there's a I can't remember who wrote about it, and I have to figure out the writer and the author who wrote about this. There's this always this tension between safety and security, right? In the U.S., you feel very secure, but you may not be very safe, right? In China, I felt very safe. It's the safest I've ever felt in my life. Like no crime. I could walk down the street. No one's gonna mug me if I lose my phone, or if someone tries to steal my phone. More than likely, I get that phone back like within an hour, right? Some like it just nothing's gonna happen. But I never felt secure,
Right.
right? Because it was like there are cameras everywhere. I couldn't just be myself. I couldn't have conversations with people. Um, so there's that element. I can't remember who wrote about it, and I
Is
listened
that
to.
out
Yeah,
of curiosity, is that something that you are told about before you go, or is that something that you had to learn while you were there, that these are the kind of feelings that you would develop and experience?
people talked around it, and I didn't know what they meant until I went there,
Okay.
and I was like, ah, okay, this is what this person meant. They just didn't tell me directly, and they should have just told me directly. We also had a um, we had a briefing when we arrived, and in my head, the entire briefing, I'm thinking this is the briefing they should have given us before we got to China.
What have you learned most, do you think, about your experiences, like traveling, having lived in those
Mhm.
cultures,
Mhm.
obviously growing up as Iranian-American in Kentucky
Mhm.
as a small minority? What would you think is the biggest movement you've experienced yourself in terms of your own personal development, your own personal ideas? I'm assuming that translates into your writing as well,
Mhm.
in terms of how you share stories, how you view life in general, how you view your role within that, how have all these experiences kind of defined you or changed you or reshaped you? Because we talked about adaptability, curiosity. I'm
Yeah.
assuming there's a curiosity factor as to learn why different cultures operate the way that they do, and how that integrates into your world.
Yeah, I think the main thing, if there is a main theme across all of this, it's learning to be um, learning to be comfortable while being uncomfortable, right? There's probably a better way to put it, but like
Well, yeah.
learning to be comfortable with discomfort, right? Like being comfortable walking into a space knowing one, you're the only non person, the only other in that environment, and being able to figure out like, okay, well, I'm hungry, I want to order food, right? And kind of looking at a menu and pointing, saying like, Jega, Iga, like, and using whatever limited language to order. Um, Also learning to kind of read the space. So like a lot of the older men, if they asked me where I was from, and I usually have a pretty thick beard because I hate shaving and my face always breaks out when I shave. So I'm like I'm just gonna keep it going. Um, Usually, if I just said I was American, they would always look at me like oh, okay, my dad's Iranian, and then immediately they're like, oh, Iran, yeah, yeah, Iran, like okay. So like sometimes learning to use all of my like identities to their fullest potential to like help break the ice. Um, and then just being more patient, right? Like um, Beijing was a hard place just because it can be frustrating, and I'm not talking about things have to move fast, but just being able to find what you need. Being able to find, I shouldn't say what you need. You can find what you need pretty much anywhere, but finding what you want, um, ordering food, the quality control of the food, um, communicating with people about what you want and what you're trying to do. Um, Making friends, like, so a lot of the expats who were there, they've been there for like 5, 10, 15 years. And some of them are like, you're pretty cool, but like you're leaving in 2 years. I don't want to be. I don't want to put investment in being friends with you. So
Mm.
like there's that, but just like I appreciated that. Like he was just being honest. I'm like, okay, cool. If I see you, high five. Whatever. Um, yeah, and just a smile and a hello, and kind of learning to be a little bit more like gracious, and that like we're in their space, like I'm in your space, I'm coming in and taking up your area, and so like I'm bothering you, I'm a nuisance to you, so I have to figure out a way to like just deal with that, and figure out a way to communicate in a way that like if there is tension, it walks that tension back and it doesn't make it worse.
Yeah,
And
the comfortable being uncomfortable lines one I use a lot just with kids in general in
yeah,
terms of developing. Not obviously I coaching the
yeah,
soccer world, but
yeah,
in terms of even like working out, right? How a muscle grows is
yeah,
by stretching it, breaking it down, and
yeah,
then allowing it to regrow. So I think the idea of being uncomfortable is really important in terms of developing a ability to overcome different environments, situations, cultures, being aware. Um, Again, my curiosity comes from where that originates from in any individual.
yeah,
So it feels like you've always been comfortable in the majority of the environments that you've been in, even when they've kind of stretched you. Would
yeah,
that be fair to say? Like
yeah,
even from 4 or 5 years old, you're asking questions that could be due to your dad making. Um, I think the biggest thing that stood out with you, like your mom and dad, is they were already uh, big characters within the community
yeah,
in terms of in swimming,
yeah,
social work.
yeah,
So you already had that connection with the community. So you
yeah.
wasn't necessarily an outsider looking in.
Right.
Uh, but yeah, do you know where that ability to feel comfortable in uncomfortable situations comes from, or has that just always been there? It doesn't feel like that's evolved for you. It just seems natural for you.
I think that's been a natural thing, but I think over time it's I mean it's funny because my friends in DC, I was like kind of the older friend, which is different. I was the youngest of my siblings. Um and they would always call me grandpa because I would always like want to go to the same places and like want to like do the same general things and not kind of get out of my routine, my schedule. Um which is funny, but anyway, um um yeah, I don't know. I think it's always been just this thing of like I always wanted to like see different places and see different things and kind of engage with people, and kind of take it at face value until they tell me otherwise. And um, yeah, I think it has. It's just been something that's just been a part of who I was. It's just gotten better, I guess. Right. So like I know what my limits are. Like, I'm not going to eat like pig intestines, or like I'm not going to go and be like a weird food eater. Um, which, if you're that type of person, China is a place to go because there's a lot of really weird food
Nu-
items and weird
nuance. We'll call it nuance
nuances.
cuisine.
Yeah, there's a lot of odd or nuanced food presentation styles that kind of are like,
What's
no.
the weirdest or oddest food? I feel like they serve like
Oh, what do they have?
maybe I'm getting myself into trouble, but serve like bat or something. Have I seen that on travel?
I don't know if they did. That may be like a real like rural space thing. Um, there were places that sold like cow lungs, like cow lung. Was it cow lung or was it cow intestine or cow throat? Um, they would make a stew, or like kind of like a, yes, like a thicker stew, with it, and people would eat that over rice or like just with the stew, and it's like that's
Did you ever try it, or it just
no, I
turned off?
didn't. That was no. No. I did go to Japan and I did try. I tried chicken liver and chicken heart,
Okay,
and
that's not too
it's not too
out there
crazy.
though, right?
Yeah, but it still was just
Yeah,
like that's. I know my
yeah.
that's probably
I'm
my
not
limit.
a Yeah, I'm not a heart and liver
Yeah,
type of guy. Yeah,
yeah,
keep me with just the meat and and
yeah.
I'm good with that. But yeah, I mean, I guess you should have been told to immerse yourself in the culture and eat your chicken, your cow intestine soup or whatever you wanted to
No,
do. But
that no, because it's just like
it's-
uh, that's my. I guess that's my like when you're doing that being uncomfortable thing. You know you also have to know what your limit is, and so
yeah,
like
yeah.
as you
So
travel, you figure that out a little bit more. So
yeah,
yeah.
what's the Iranian? Because I think you I saw some articles about you growing up with your dad, and he used to try and what was an article you sent me? I think about obviously you're faithful Muslim, right? In terms of eating pork, and you're not supposed to, but your dad was pretty
My
pretty
dad,
flex on.
my dad's vision and view on eating pork as Muslim. His name is Muhammad, so it's like you can't like avoid that connection. Um, and his view on it is God is forgiving and pork is delicious. So there you go. He was like, I think God has bigger fish to fry than to worry about if I'm eating pork or not. So I'm gonna just eat pork. Okay, great. So
That was your dad just enjoying pork, not nothing to do with Kentucky or what was available to him
um,
there.
I think so. So in the community, when he grew up in Iran, they had you could have pork. You could find pork in places. There was a butcher, an Armenian butcher, the Christian butcher could slaughter the pig, and he said the best bologna, best mortadella, was made by this Armenian butcher, and so he would go, and that's where he would go and have his bologna sandwich or mortadella sandwich. His friends would go to the same butcher, and these same friends are the same friends who were calling him out for eating pork in the story that I told. So he's like, "Well, I know which butcher you used to go to." And that guy was not serving beef bologna; he was serving pork bologna. So, yeah,
Um, a couple of last questions for you, because I know we're running quite
yeah.
on time here. Is obviously you've gone through many pivots
Hmm.
in your career, from diplomacy in school,
Yeah,
Kentucky to DC, the Navy,
yeah.
um, part of the story, bartender,
Hmm.
obviously writing and photography now. Um, I'm assuming because you're kind of tied to your wife and obviously her role, her job. Is there a and I don't want to get you in trouble with your wife if she ever watches this. I don't know if she'll get to the hour and 27 of us talking
Yeah.
about football and such. But what is there a continuing curiosity about movement and travel and experiencing new places? Is there a part of you that just wants to kind of settle roots, and where are you at in terms of your journey from that perspective?
My general sentiment is um, I would like to stay longer in the next places that we go. Um, but I am not sure like if I necessarily want to sprout roots somewhere and stay. It also is going to depend on the kids, right? So like they adapted to being here in Poland quite quickly and easily. That may change as they get older if we, wherever the next place is that we end up. So it's more that I am very comfortable living abroad. Um, I don't want to say that I don't want to go back to the U.S. and live, but I like my life here and living in these spaces because it's just such a I like the challenge, I guess. Whereas in DC, I got real comfortable real quick, and I didn't feel I didn't feel compelled to like push myself to do something or to
Right.
have a goal, right? Whereas here, both in Beijing and in Warsaw, I felt more compelled to like, okay, I need to have a goal. I need to have like a plan, a future plan to try to achieve something. I don't know if that's like there's like you feel uncomfortable, and so you have to kind of like uh, go after that. I don't know. Uh,
I think that there's probably a challenge element to that, right? In
yeah,
terms of when you feel that you get to a point where you're not challenging yourself or you're going through the motions, maybe that's when the comfort sets in. I can only speak again from my own experience, but I
yeah,
was in a place for 15 years and probably should have looked for something different earlier than that.
hmm
Or whether it was fear to move on to something different, or whether it was a security blanket that I felt comfortable in that environment, that I was kind of job safe and financially secure in that moment, that maybe restricted me from pursuing the things I'm pursuing now, which don't make me anywhere near as much money, but I'm more relaxed and feel like I'm enjoying pursuing all these different things that I wasn't able
yeah,
to before. So
yeah,
I'm not sure if that ties into that.
yeah.
Um, last two questions for you. Is the idea of travel and not necessarily putting down roots, is that a ongoing curiosity that you have about yourself or different places that you want to experience? Because a lot of your writing is based in um, obviously football and soccer and
Yeah,
food and culture.
yeah,
Is that what drives that desire to keep moving outside of obviously your wife's work, but
yeah,
just a curiosity? Is that driving you forward?
yeah. There's general curiosity. I mean, I lived my first 29 years in 28, 29 years living in Kentucky, right? So I did do a study abroad in Germany. I was 20, 21. Um, and I think that all that did was make that desire worse because I thrived in that environment. And so, on the one hand, I've yearned for this like I need a place. I need a place I can go and where I feel comfortable, where I can sprout roots if I want or build a foundation. But then this other part of me is just like I want to see the world. I want to go and like see all these different things going on. And like if I sprout roots, then I can't do that. And
Yeah,
it's and I think it's born out of one, as I said before, having a dad who was an immigrant from a place that we can't really get to, and so that kind of is the catalyst for a lot of this. It's like, okay, well, I can't experience Iran, but I can go to all these other places. Um, so there's that, but it's also just like I enjoy going to a new place and just observing and watching and engaging and mixing it up with people, finding a way to see how people do things. And football is one way to do that. Beer is another way to do that. Food is another way to do that. And so photography is also, but I am not good enough to be able to talk to people about what I'm doing. So like that's more just a hobby. Um, but yeah, I just like the idea of going and seeing new places and like you know engaging with like different fan groups or different people and watching how things work, and hearing the history a little bit about each place.
yeah.
So
Does your wife enjoy the travel and the movement?
she does. She has to travel for work. She doesn't necessarily like the travel for work because she doesn't always get to explore the places that she goes. She's like in a hotel room at the
Yeah.
embassy or consulate on an airplane back home. Um, but the trips that we've gone on as families, she's enjoyed, whether it was in Seoul or Tokyo or um, Hong Kong, and then down to Krakow as well. Um, that was, yeah, she's enjoyed it, and I think she's a little different. Like my both of my parents are like, go, just go and see everything. You know, if you come back, you come back. you know, I mean, they don't put it that way, but like they're like, we understand if you don't like if you stay overseas or something. I think her parents are more like, oh, like when are you coming back to the U.S. to work? You know, so, uh, which is fun. It's just different. You know, they are living in spaces where they kind of grew up around. So, and all their families are around there. So,
And my last question for you, David, and again, I really appreciate your time with me today. Is, and I ask this of everybody, is if you had to go back and talk to your 10-year-old self, do you have something specific that you would say?
uh, oh, what would I say to my 10-year-old self? It would be focus on yourself and don't believe, don't worry about what everyone else is thinking. Just do your thing. Like just go find what gives you passion and follow that. Um, I think if I had followed that originally as an 18 to 25-year-old, I probably would be in the same place, but I would be further along than what I am now. So I think I spent too much time as a kid worried about everyone else and not about what I needed to do.
Don't forget to like and subscribe to help us bring these stories to more individuals.